The moon goddess sealed an ancient wolf within the Alpha King's soul, until my echo of the first moon awakened it. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, it is free, and it is the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic and emotional stories like this one. Your support truly means the world to us. Before we begin, tell us in the comments where in the world you are watching from and what time it is where you are right now. We love seeing how far these stories travel and knowing who is joining us today. Now let us begin today's story. Some souls are chosen long before they are ever born, and the moon remembers every promise they forget. Every year, when the first full moon of spring rose above the towering peaks surrounding Ashbourne Kingdom, thousands of people gathered beneath its silver light to celebrate the festival of the first moon. Ancient songs echoed through the streets. Children carried glowing lanterns shaped like white wolves, and elders whispered prayers that had survived for generations without anyone remembering where they had first begun. To most of the kingdom, it was simply a beautiful tradition. To Serena Whitmore, it was another ordinary evening. At 23 years old, the white-skinned Omega had never expected her quiet life to become part of history. She spent her days helping families in her mountain village, gathering herbs from peaceful forest trails, comforting frightened children with gentle stories, and offering kindness wherever it was needed. No one considered her remarkable. She held no noble title, possessed no legendary bloodline, and sought no attention. Yet there was something about her calm presence that made people feel safe, even if they could never explain why. As twilight settled across the kingdom, Serena joined the annual procession, climbing the stone path toward the ancient moon shrine overlooking Blackwood Valley. Hundreds of voices blended together beneath the glowing sky, repeating an old hymn whose meaning had faded long ago. When the final verse arrived, Serena quietly sang a melody that felt strangely familiar, although she had never learned it from anyone. The notes flowed naturally, gentle and clear, as though they had been waiting inside her heart for years. Around her, the crowd continued singing the traditional words, unaware that her voice had separated into an older harmony forgotten by history itself. At that exact moment, many miles away inside the royal palace, King Adrian Ashbourne suddenly stopped walking through the Hall of Kings. A sharp wave of emotion swept through him unlike anything he had ever experienced. It was not pain. It was recognition. His heartbeat slowed as an invisible warmth spread through his chest, and for one impossible instant, he heard the same mysterious melody drifting across the night air despite the great distance separating him from the festival. Every torch lining the marble corridor flickered softly. The silver crest embroidered upon his royal cloak shimmered beneath the moonlight pouring through the tall windows. Confused yet strangely peaceful, Adrian closed his eyes, and something deep within his soul answered the distant song. Back at the shrine, the enormous white stone monument standing at its center began to glow with faint silver lines that slowly spread across its ancient surface like moonlight awakening after centuries of silence. Gasps rose from the crowd as delicate symbols no one recognized appeared one after another. Serena stepped backward in astonishment, unable to understand why the glowing patterns seemed to pulse in perfect rhythm with her heartbeat. Then she looked toward the sky. Behind the full moon, hidden for only a heartbeat, she saw the translucent outline of a magnificent white wolf larger than any mountain, its peaceful eyes fixed not upon the monument, but somewhere far beyond the horizon. At the very same instant, inside the palace, Adrian opened his eyes and saw the identical white wolf reflected in a mirror beside the throne. It was not standing behind him. It was looking outward from within him. Before either of them could understand what they had witnessed, the vision vanished like mist beneath the morning sun, leaving only one impossible question lingering beneath the ancient moon. What secret had been sleeping inside the Alpha King's soul for 1,000 years? And why had an ordinary Omega been the one destined to awaken its first forgotten echo? The festival ended, but its impossible miracle refused to fade with the night. Before sunrise, whispers traveled faster than the mountain wind, carrying stories from one village to another. Some believed the glowing monument had been a blessing from the moon goddess. Others quietly feared that an ancient warning had finally awakened after centuries of silence. Serena Whitmore returned to her small cottage believing she would never again witness anything so extraordinary, yet sleep never came. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the same unfamiliar melody echoing softly through her thoughts, not as music drifting from outside, but as though someone deep within forgotten history continued singing beyond the reach of time itself. When dawn finally painted the eastern sky with pale gold, a group of royal riders arrived at the village. Their silver cloaks carried the crest of Ashbourne Kingdom, and their horses stopped before Serena's front gate with quiet discipline. The captain stepped forward respectfully rather than with authority. He explained that King Adrian Ashbourne requested her presence at Blackwood Castle immediately. The villagers watched in stunned silence. Serena herself could think of no reason why the Alpha King would summon an ordinary Omega who had never once stepped beyond her peaceful mountain home. Hours later, the towering walls of Blackwood Castle rose before her beneath a clear blue sky. Marble towers reflected the morning sunlight while banners bearing the royal crest moved gently in the breeze. Serena followed the captain through magnificent corridors lined with portraits of generations of Alpha rulers until she entered an elegant library unlike anything she had ever imagined. Thousands of ancient books rested upon towering shelves reaching toward a painted ceiling covered with silver stars and phases of the moon. Standing beside a long oak table covered with weathered manuscripts, Adrian turned to greet her. He appeared calm, yet there was unmistakable curiosity in his eyes. He thanked Serena for accepting his invitation and admitted that he had experienced something impossible at the exact moment she had sung during the festival. Before Serena could answer, a sudden warmth spread across the inside of her left wrist. She looked down in surprise as a delicate silver crescent surrounded by tiny glowing lines slowly appeared upon her skin. The mark shimmered only for a few heartbeats before becoming almost invisible once more. Adrian stepped closer, not out of suspicion but concern. He gently opened an ancient scroll already resting upon the table. The faded parchment displayed the same crescent symbol beside illustrations of a great white wolf standing beneath a full moon. A line written in forgotten script had recently been translated by royal scholars, though no one had fully understood its meaning. It read, "When the echo of the first moon returns to an honest soul, the sleeping guardian within the chosen king shall remember the beginning." Serena repeated the words quietly, and as the final sentence left her lips, one of the oldest books upon the shelf opened by itself. A single white feather drifted gracefully into the air before settling upon the manuscript. Neither wind nor visible force had moved it. The library became perfectly still. Adrian and Serena exchanged silent glances filled not with fear, but with growing wonder. Somewhere beyond the castle walls, hidden among distant cliffs touched by afternoon light, a magnificent white wolf watched the kingdom without making a sound, its peaceful silver eyes reflecting the moon even beneath the brightness of the day, as though it had been patiently waiting for this forgotten promise to begin unfolding once again. That evening, the castle settled into an unusual silence, as though every stone within its ancient walls had begun listening for something long forgotten. Serena Whitmore remained in the royal guest chamber overlooking the moonlit gardens, unable to ignore the quiet melody that continued to drift through her thoughts. It was never loud, never demanding, but each passing hour made it feel more familiar. When she finally closed her eyes, sleep carried her somewhere that felt both impossible and strangely comforting. She found herself standing within an endless forest where towering white trees stretched toward a silver sky unlike any she had ever seen. Their leaves shimmered softly without the slightest breeze, and every step she took caused tiny streams of moonlight to ripple across the ground instead of shadows. There were no signs of danger, only an overwhelming feeling that someone had been patiently waiting for her arrival. In the distance, a magnificent white wolf stood upon a gentle hill, its silver eyes calm and filled with quiet wisdom. It did not approach, nor did it speak with words. Instead, it simply looked toward a narrow path disappearing into the glowing forest. Serena followed the direction of its gaze, and as she began walking, faint voices slowly surrounded her. They were not conversations. They were memories, gentle laughter, promises spoken beneath the moon, children thanking unseen protectors, leaders making vows they sincerely believed would last forever. None of the voices belonged to people she recognized, yet every memory carried warmth instead of sorrow. As she reached the end of the path, she discovered an enormous circular stone resting beneath the branches of the oldest tree in the forest. Carved across its surface was the same crescent symbol that had appeared upon her wrist inside the royal library. The moment her fingertips brushed the ancient carving, countless glowing lines spread across the stone like flowing rivers of light. Images appeared within the brightness. She saw early settlements where humans and great white wolves lived together peacefully beneath the same moon. She saw the moon goddess watching silently from the heavens as both sides exchanged solemn promises of trust, wisdom, and compassion. Then the visions became blurred, as though an invisible hand had hidden the most important chapter from history itself. Before Serena could understand what had been erased, a gentle voice finally reached her heart. It was neither male nor female, neither young nor old. It simply whispered, the truth was never destroyed. It was only forgotten. She suddenly awakened just before dawn, her heart calm rather than frightened. Outside her window, the first rays of sunlight touched the castle towers, but something had changed. The silver mark upon her wrist glowed once again, brighter than before. At that very moment, King Adrian Ashbourne stood alone inside the Hall of Kings, where another impossible experience unfolded. Without warning, he heard distant footsteps echoing through the empty chamber, although no one else was present. As he turned toward the great mirror beside the throne, the reflection staring back at him was no longer entirely his own. Behind his image stood the majestic white wolf for only a heartbeat before fading into shimmering light. Instead of fear, Adrian felt an unfamiliar sense of peace settle deep within his soul, accompanied by memories that did not belong to his own lifetime. Across the kingdom, hidden high among the silent cliffs beyond Blackwood Valley, the living white wolf slowly opened its eyes toward the rising sun. For the first time in countless generations, the forgotten echoes had begun returning, one memory at a time, guiding both the humble Omega and the Alpha King toward a truth that neither history nor time had been able to erase. The morning after the shared visions, neither Serena Whitmore nor King Adrian Ashbourne spoke of destiny. Instead, they spoke of questions. Guided only by the mysterious memories that had begun surfacing within them, they returned to the royal library and searched through maps older than the kingdom itself. Most had faded beyond recognition, but one fragile parchment revealed a narrow mountain trail leading to a place simply marked as the Temple of the First Moon. There were no descriptions, no records of royal visits, and no explanation of why generations of historians had ignored it. The temple seemed to exist only as a forgotten whisper hidden between the pages of history. Adrian decided they would follow the map before more answers disappeared beneath time. By midday, they rode into the northern mountains, leaving behind the crowded roads and familiar villages. The higher they climbed, the quieter the world became. Tall pine trees surrounded the winding trail, their branches filtering the sunlight into soft silver beams that danced across the forest floor. Cool mountain air carried the scent of wildflowers and fresh stone, creating a peaceful silence unlike anything inside the castle walls. Serena noticed that every few miles, weathered stone markers stood beside the trail. Each carried the same crescent symbol glowing faintly whenever she walked near it, as though the path itself remembered those who once traveled there. Neither she nor Adrian could explain the strange welcome, yet both sensed they were being guided rather than tested. As the afternoon sun drifted westward, the forest opened into a wide valley where an ancient temple rested against the mountainside. It was far smaller than either of them had imagined. There were no towering gates, no glittering treasures, and no signs of forgotten armies. Time had gently embraced the quiet sanctuary instead of destroying it. White vines covered smooth marble walls, while delicate carvings of wolves and moons decorated every archway. The temple felt less like a monument and more like a place where people had once gathered to remember something precious. They stepped inside together. Rays of sunlight poured through circular openings in the ceiling, illuminating dozens of stone murals stretching along the walls. One by one, the carvings revealed scenes unlike anything preserved within the royal archives. Humans and great white wolves stood side by side beneath the full moon, planting orchards together, protecting children, sharing harvest celebrations, and offering promises with open hands rather than raised weapons. Serena slowly walked from one mural to the next, her fingertips brushing the cool stone as another gentle wave of memories stirred within her heart. These were not tales of conquest. They were stories of trust. Adrian remained silent as he studied the faces carved into the ancient walls. Every leader shown beside the wolves wore neither crown nor armor, only expressions of humility and gratitude. It challenged everything he had been taught about the earliest Alpha Kings. Near the center of the temple stood a circular altar carved from luminous white stone. As Serena approached, the silver mark upon her wrist glowed once again. Without thinking, she rested her hand upon the altar. Soft moonlight blossomed across its surface despite the bright afternoon sky outside. Hidden lines appeared, joining together to form a single sentence that neither map nor history had ever recorded. It read, "Only those who seek remembrance instead of power may walk beyond this promise." At that very moment, a quiet breeze flowed through the temple, although every doorway remained still. Adrian turned toward the entrance and saw, standing peacefully beyond the columns, the magnificent white wolf watching them with calm, patient eyes. It neither approached nor retreated. It simply lowered its head in silent acknowledgement before turning toward a narrow passage concealed behind the temple, inviting them to follow the next forgotten chapter waiting beyond the light. Serena Whitmore and King Adrian Ashbourne followed the hidden passage beyond the temple with quiet determination, guided not by spoken directions, but by an unshakable feeling that every step had been prepared long before either of them had been born. The narrow path wound gently through the mountains until it opened into a vast underground chamber where countless crystals reflected pale streams of natural light from above. The air felt warm despite the ancient stone surrounding them, and the silence carried a comforting stillness rather than loneliness. At the center of the chamber stood a circular sanctuary unlike anything preserved in the royal records. 12 towering pillars surrounded a polished floor carved with the phases of the moon, while delicate silver lines connected every symbol into a single magnificent pattern. The great white wolf walked slowly into the sanctuary ahead of them before sitting peacefully beside the center circle, watching without fear or urgency. Serena stepped forward first, and as her foot touched the ancient design, the silver mark upon her wrist shone brighter than ever before. At once, the chamber awakened. Gentle beams of light rose from the carvings and gathered above the sanctuary, forming living memories that surrounded them like floating windows into another age. They watched families and wolves laughing together beneath moonlit skies. They saw villages where alpha leaders and ancient wolves planted forests instead of building fortresses. They witnessed children learning stories directly from the wise guardians who had protected the valleys for generations. Every memory revealed trust, kindness, and shared purpose. Then the brightest vision appeared before them all. A majestic white wolf stood beneath the full moon facing the first Alpha King, not as ruler and servant, but as equals bound by a sacred promise. Above them, the moon goddess extended gentle light across both souls, and a quiet voice echoed throughout the chamber. It said that every age would eventually face fear, and fear would tempt people to forget compassion. To preserve hope beyond the reach of time, one ancient wolf would willingly enter the soul of every chosen Alpha King, carrying the original promise where no enemy, no disaster, and no passing century could ever erase it. Serena felt tears gather in her eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming beauty of the truth unfolding before her. The ancient wolf had never been imprisoned. It had never been cursed. It had chosen this path freely, becoming the living guardian of remembrance so that future generations would always have a chance to rediscover what had been lost. Adrian remained motionless as the meaning settled within his heart. All his life, he had believed leadership was inherited through blood and protected by strength. Now he understood that the greatest responsibility of an Alpha King was to preserve wisdom with humility. As the final memory faded, the sanctuary grew quiet once more. The great white wolf slowly rose and looked directly at Adrian. For the first time, the Alpha King sensed not another creature before him, but an old companion whose presence had quietly walked beside every worthy ruler throughout history. At that moment, the echo of the first moon awakened more deeply within Serena than ever before. It did not reveal another vision. Instead, it filled her heart with one simple certainty. The greatest secret had already been uncovered, yet the most important truth remained hidden. The promise had been remembered, but the reason it had ever been forgotten was still waiting somewhere beyond the sanctuary, patiently calling them toward the final chapter of a story that history had never dared to tell. Leaving the hidden sanctuary behind, Serena Whitmore and King Adrian Ashbourne followed the white wolf through a narrow corridor carved into the heart of the mountain. The passage gradually opened into a circular chamber unlike any place they had seen before. Its ceiling reflected the night sky, even though the afternoon sun still shone outside, and countless tiny lights drifted gently through the air like living stars. At the center stood a single crystal basin filled with perfectly still water that reflected not their faces but fragments of distant memories waiting to be understood. The great white wolf stopped beside the basin and quietly lowered its head. Serena instinctively stepped forward. As her fingertips hovered above the crystal surface, the silver mark upon her wrist glowed with a peaceful radiance, and the echo of the first moon awakened more completely than ever before. The water remained perfectly calm, yet another forgotten memory unfolded around them. They saw the moon goddess standing beneath the first full moon, surrounded by the earliest alpha leaders and the ancient wolves. Her expression carried neither sorrow nor judgment, but quiet hope. Her voice flowed through the chamber with extraordinary gentleness. She spoke of a future when fear would tempt every generation to value power above wisdom and titles above compassion. She explained that no kingdom could be protected forever by strength alone, because even the strongest walls would one day crumble. Only honest hearts willing to remember the truth could preserve peace across the centuries. Then she revealed the final promise. One day, when the original covenant had nearly vanished from memory, an ordinary Omega with no desire for greatness would awaken the echo of the first moon. That sacred gift would not command armies, heal wounds, or grant authority. Its only purpose would be to restore forgotten truth by allowing sincere hearts to remember what had always existed. Serena stood in silent disbelief as the vision slowly faded. She had never considered herself extraordinary. Everything she had done throughout her life had been simple acts of kindness offered without expectation of recognition. Yet she finally understood that the moon goddess had never searched for the most powerful person. She had searched for the most genuine one. Adrian looked toward Serena with quiet admiration rather than surprise. He realized that every moment leading them here had been shaped not by royal destiny, but by the quiet choices of a humble woman who had never stopped choosing compassion. As that understanding settled within him, another memory surfaced from deep inside his own soul. He remembered standing beneath the same moon countless lifetimes ago, not as Adrian Ashbourne, but as one of many Alpha Guardians who had willingly accepted the ancient wolf's presence as a sacred responsibility rather than a privilege. The memory disappeared almost as quickly as it had arrived, yet its meaning remained. Leadership had never been about being above others. It had always been about protecting promises that belonged to everyone. The crystal basin gradually became clear once more, but one final sentence appeared upon its glowing surface before the light slowly faded. It read, "Truth returns only when it is welcomed with humility." The white wolf lifted its eyes toward the distant horizon beyond the mountain walls, and both Serena and Adrian sensed that their journey was nearing its final purpose. They had uncovered the forgotten promise and the ancient prophecy, but now they faced the greatest responsibility of all, deciding whether an entire kingdom was ready to remember the truth that had patiently waited beneath the light of the first moon for 1,000 years. When Serena Whitmore and King Adrian Ashbourne returned to Blackwood Castle, the kingdom looked exactly as they had left it, yet everything felt different because they now carried a truth capable of changing generations. The royal council gathered that evening inside the Hall of Kings. After Adrian requested an extraordinary assembly, noble families, respected scholars, village representatives, and the oldest royal advisors filled the chamber, expecting news of a forgotten temple or perhaps another unexplained miracle. Instead, Adrian stood before them without his ceremonial crown, choosing to speak not as a ruler demanding obedience, but as a guardian sharing a responsibility. Serena remained quietly beside him, her presence calm and unassuming, exactly as it had always been. Adrian began by describing the hidden sanctuary, the ancient murals, and the memories preserved beyond the reach of history. He spoke of the first covenant between humanity and the ancient wolves, explaining that the earliest alpha leaders had never ruled through fear alone, but through humility, compassion, and trust. Some listeners exchanged uncertain glances while others listened with complete silence, sensing the sincerity behind every word. Serena then stepped forward. She did not ask anyone to believe her simply because she had experienced extraordinary visions. Instead, she gently explained the purpose of the echo of the first moon. It had never granted power or authority. It had only allowed forgotten memories to be seen by honest hearts willing to accept them without pride. As she spoke, the atmosphere inside the chamber gradually softened. It was as though the truth itself carried a quiet peace that required no argument to defend it. Suddenly, a familiar silver glow appeared near the great windows overlooking the palace gardens. A single white feather drifted through the open air before settling gently upon the royal floor. Every conversation stopped. Slowly, the magnificent white wolf walked into view outside the tall windows, illuminated by the rising full moon. It neither entered the hall nor demanded attention. It simply stood with calm dignity, looking toward Adrian with peaceful eyes that reflected countless generations of shared memory. At that moment, every person present felt an unexpected warmth settle within their hearts. Some remembered childhood stories their grandparents had once told before those tales slowly disappeared from tradition. Others recalled old songs whose meanings had long been forgotten. No one experienced fear. Instead, they experienced remembrance. Adrian quietly understood that the ancient wolf had not come to prove its existence. It had come to remind them that truth did not need to force belief. It only needed willing hearts prepared to receive it. He turned back toward the council and made a decision that surprised everyone. The hidden sanctuary would never belong exclusively to the royal family again. Once the path had been carefully restored, every citizen seeking wisdom rather than status would be welcomed to visit the temple of the first moon and learn the kingdom's true history for themselves. The chamber remained silent for several long moments before the oldest royal historian slowly rose from his seat. With deep emotion shining in his eyes, he bowed respectfully, not only to the Alpha King but also to Serena, acknowledging that genuine humility had accomplished what centuries of scholarship had never achieved. Outside the palace, the white wolf gently lifted its face toward the brilliant moon before quietly disappearing into the silver light, leaving behind only the peaceful certainty that forgotten promises become strongest when they are shared freely rather than guarded by power alone. Spring slowly transformed Ashbourne Kingdom in the weeks that followed, and with every passing day the forgotten history of the first moon became part of everyday life once again. Stone pathways leading toward the temple of the first moon were carefully restored, not to create another royal monument, but to welcome anyone who sincerely wished to understand the kingdom's true beginnings. Farmers walked beside scholars, children explored the ancient murals with wide eyes, and elders found themselves remembering songs they had not sung since childhood. The sanctuary that had remained hidden for centuries became a place of quiet reflection rather than celebration, where visitors left carrying wisdom instead of souvenirs. King Adrian Ashbourne kept the promise he had made before the royal council. Every future leader, whether born into nobility or chosen through service, would first spend time inside the temple learning that authority existed to protect others rather than elevate oneself. The lesson gradually changed the atmosphere throughout the kingdom. Decisions within the palace became slower, more thoughtful, and guided by listening before speaking. Village representatives were invited to share their voices more often, and the distance that had once separated the castle from ordinary families slowly disappeared. Serena Whitmore quietly returned to the simple life she had always loved. Although many people wished to honor her with titles, ceremonies, and positions within the royal court, she accepted none of them. She believed that kindness lost something precious when it was offered in exchange for recognition. Instead, she continued visiting villages throughout the mountains, comforting anxious children, helping neighbors care for their gardens, and sharing the forgotten stories that had been entrusted to her heart. Wherever she traveled, people noticed that hope seemed to grow naturally around her, not because she possessed extraordinary abilities, but because she reminded everyone that ordinary compassion could preserve extraordinary promises. As the weeks became months, the silver mark upon Serena's wrist appeared less frequently, until one peaceful evening it faded completely beneath the light of the full moon. She smiled gently rather than feeling sadness. The echo of the first moon had never belonged to her. It had simply passed through her life to complete the purpose for which it had patiently waited across countless generations. Its disappearance did not feel like losing a gift. It felt like watching a promise fulfilled exactly as it had always been intended. On that same evening, Adrian quietly climbed the mountain path alone and entered the temple of the first moon without guards or ceremony. Standing before the ancient altar, he thanked the moon goddess not for choosing him as king, but for teaching him what kind of king he should strive to become. As he finished speaking, a soft breeze moved gently through the sanctuary, although the air outside remained perfectly still. Near the entrance, the magnificent white wolf appeared once more, beneath the silver glow of the rising moon. For several peaceful moments, neither king nor guardian moved. No words were needed between companions who finally understood one another. The great wolf slowly lowered its head in quiet acknowledgement before turning toward the distant mountains, where its graceful form gradually dissolved into shimmering moonlight. Adrian watched until the last trace of silver disappeared into the night sky, carrying with it the comforting certainty that true guardians never sought praise because the greatest promises were always fulfilled through humble hearts that chose truth, wisdom, and love long after history had forgotten their names. Years passed, yet the promise awakened beneath the first moon never faded from the hearts of the people of Ashbourne Kingdom. Every spring, when the full moon rose above the mountain peaks, families once again climbed the ancient stone path together, carrying simple lanterns and quiet gratitude instead of expectations for miracles. The festival of the first moon became more than a celebration. It became a tradition of remembrance. Children listened as their parents shared the true story of the first covenant between humanity and the ancient wolves, not as a legend meant to inspire fear or admiration, but as a reminder that kindness, humility, and honesty could outlive even the passing of centuries. King Adrian Ashbourne grew into the wise ruler he had always hoped to become. Whenever important decisions faced the kingdom, he returned first to the temple of the first moon, where the peaceful silence reminded him that every choice should protect the people before protecting the throne. Those who served beside him noticed that he listened more than he spoke, encouraged understanding before judgment, and measured success not by the wealth of the kingdom, but by the well-being of the families who called it home. His greatest achievement was never written as a military victory or political triumph. Instead, history remembered him as the Alpha King who restored forgotten truth without demanding praise for himself. Serena Whitmore remained exactly who she had always been. She never accepted noble titles, never moved into the royal palace, and never allowed others to place her above the ordinary people she loved serving. She continued traveling through mountain villages with the same gentle smile, teaching children the ancient songs whose meanings had finally returned, and reminding every person she met that even the smallest act of compassion could become part of a promise larger than themselves. People often thanked her for changing the kingdom, but Serena always answered with the same quiet words. She would simply say that truth had always been waiting to be remembered, and all she had done was listen. One peaceful evening many years later, during another festival of the first moon, a young girl wandered slightly away from the joyful gathering and quietly approached the ancient stone monument that had first awakened beneath Serena's voice. Curious, she placed her small hand upon its smooth surface. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then a tiny silver light gently shimmered beneath her fingertips before rising into the night air like a single glowing feather. The child looked upward with wide eyes as a familiar melody drifted softly across the mountain breeze. High above the valley, hidden within the silver glow of the full moon, the graceful outline of a magnificent white wolf appeared for only a heartbeat before dissolving into countless streams of light that blended peacefully with the stars. Far away, Serena and Adrian happened to look toward the same sky at the very same moment. Neither spoke. They simply smiled, understanding without explanation that the ancient guardian had not disappeared. Its purpose had merely become part of the world once again. As long as honest hearts continued choosing compassion over pride, wisdom over fear, and truth over comfort, the first promise would never be lost again. Beneath every rising full moon, the moon goddess would continue watching quietly, knowing that the greatest legacy was never extraordinary power, but ordinary people who chose to remember what truly mattered, allowing hope to pass from one generation to the next like gentle moonlight that never asked for recognition, yet faithfully returned every single spring.